There are things you can say out loud, and then there's all the things you can't. Anxiety, fear, depression, doubt. And so we stay silent. And some silences can feel sacred, like the kind of stillness that lets the gravity of what is take up all the space that it demands. But there are some silences that devastate, the kind that creeps into families, into churches, into whole communities where pain is tucked neatly out of sight. Today's conversation is about those silences. I'm Kate Bowler, and this is Everything Happens. Today, we're going to talk about what happens when the people we love are hurting and don't or can't tell us how much. Just a note before we start, this episode does include some discussion of suicide. So if you or someone you love is struggling, just know if you're in the United States or Canada, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. You are not alone, and just, take care while listening. If sorrow had a sharp sense of humor and a brilliant Canadian accent, it might sound like Miriam Toews. She is the author of so many of my favorite things. She wrote All My Puny Sorrows, Fight Night, Women Talking, holy crap, that's such a good book. And the film adaptation was nominated for Best Picture and won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay. She has written other heartbreakingly funny, sharply tender books, and it's made her one of Canada's most beloved writers. She has won basically all of the awards, but what I love most is how she writes about complicated families, about mental illness, about unlikely love, and she writes it all with a humor and defiance and a kind of hard-won grace. I have really, really been looking forward to meeting her. I feel like I've wanted to meet her all my life, and her newest memoir is my great excuse. It's called A Truce That Is Not Peace. And she's here with me today. Miriam, oh my gosh. Hello. I'm so excited to meet you.
Me too. Thank you so much for having me here.
We grew up 45 minutes apart, and you've always been the person that really understands the bizarreness, the strange alienness that is both Mennonite world and Manitoba. Apocalyptic winters. I mean, if no one has been there, it is called strange alien flatness, wide open sky, but like a claustrophobic smallness. Like,
That's a very good description. Oh, well put.
how do you think that that place in particular formed you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, it was a place physically, sort of geographically so isolated. I mean, where I grew up in Manitoba, the equivalent of a flyover state in Canada, people don't go there. Yeah, and I think that just that big open space all around me, the feeling of sort of being nothing and nobody
Yeah.
and maybe not even existing in the world. So in that way, shaped me. But then even literally in terms of my community, it was a community that was supposed to exist in the world, but not of the world, the Mennonite thing. And so I think that it was just a smallness. And I think from that smallness and from that sense of being, sort of outside of the world, the broader, wider world at large, I was able to, stand back and observe.
We grew up with such a deep I'm not special. Art is not made about me.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn on the TV and watch California teenagers have feelings.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Partridge Family, right? The Brady Bunch. I mean, that was my diet. Yeah, and pop culture for sure from America. First,
I feel very lucky to be able to ask you right now about Mennonites because for most people are not very familiar with how very unusual this community is because as an ethno-religious group, it's both an ethnic group and a religious commitment. So you're ethnically Mennonite and not religiously Mennonite now. But I'm not ethnically Mennonite, but I'm religiously Mennonite. So we're both
okay.
two different sides of the same coin.
Yeah.
But it's a very strange community to grow up inside and to even describe to others, because sometimes I find myself falling into the trap of describing them as like adorable cheese-eating pacifists, which is sort of the nicer version
Yeah.
of a community that really never intended on assimilating. That every place it moved, it needed to be alien, and even like continued to speak its medieval tongue that it borrowed like from 3 countries before that it had been exiled from. Like,
Exactly.
but the distinctiveness of the way you describe like its inheritance in your life. If someone were to ask you how to describe Mennonites, how do you describe it?
I mean, Mennonites are so many different things. I am a Mennonite. I don't. I mean, I grew up in a very conservative Mennonite community, one of the first Mennonite settlements in Canada. I'm a Russian Mennonite. You know, they're Mennonite. They're Swiss Mennonites. They're, you know, they're the Mennonites from Pennsylvania, Lancaster. You know, they're Mennonites all over the place. The Mennonites are people that are sort of constantly on the move historically, persecuted for their religious beliefs, which included pacifism, of course, that's sort of central tenet of the faith, and being apart from the world. We're all familiar with the Mennonites, or maybe we're not familiar, but you know, Mennonites from the colonies, from the ultra conservative colonies, for instance, who dress a certain way. My mother is a Mennonite and belongs to a Mennonite church here in downtown Toronto. A very liberal, very open-minded, very nurturing, very tolerant, very loving, you know, church congregation. Inspiring. I go there with her sometimes now because she's very old. She needs, you know, more help. So she needs help going to church too. So I will go with her, and I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah.
You know, I'm inspired by it. And it's so completely different from the church that I grew up in my Mennonite community.
The world that you describe has a very gothic quality to it that I really enjoy. I really enjoy you bringing that to life. Like, there's incredible like lightness and connection when people describe the word belonging, but there's also such a long shadow of all those who feel excluded or like our regular imperfections don't let us live up to.
It's so true. I mean, when I think of my Mennonite community, I think about it more and more, you know, as I get older. I mean, I'm there, you know, I'm half there, half here, and you know, certainly in my imagination, and I miss it. I miss all sorts of things about it. You know, I lived there until I was 18 and had finished school and then left, but there are all sorts of beautiful aspects to it, to this kind of collective community where I'm related to everybody. We're all related to each other. We all know each other. We all know, but then, you know, like you say,
Yeah.
but then, you know, there is the awful,
Yes.
you know, the oppressive kind of, you know, the church sort of, you know, sanctioned almost in a sense,
Yeah.
persecution, you know, in and of itself. I mean, the discipline, the rules, the you know, emphasis on guilt, on shame, on and you know, and it's very, very difficult to be a human being,
Yeah.
you know, within that kind of environment. Yeah.
Yeah. When I grew up in Winnipeg, and city Mennonites often have very different experiences, but my parents had a habit, like a practice of taking in Hutterite women who had escaped from the colony if they were like, truly experiencing like oppression. I mean,
Yeah.
for things like, frankly, like reading the Bible on their own, or wanting to wear pants, or trying to get out of an abusive relationship. And this lovely Hutterite woman who was my babysitter growing up really was the one that taught me to pray. And she said that she was so fearful of God because she'd only been taught that you had to pray on your knees. And that one time she was in the hospital and she couldn't get down on her knees. And she feared in that moment that God would utterly abandon her and she would die in rejection. And like, that sounds exaggerated to some people, but there is such like a cataclysmic feeling of like being close to God, or God is withheld from you. And it has these like, enormous implications for people's lives.
Absolutely. And, and it's up to us to sort of reclaim, in a sense, that faith or that relationship, with God, or however you want to put it, outside of those, those oppressive sort of definitions of what it is to be, a member of the church, basically a member of, of Christ's followers. And I know when I was 9 years old, I was, I would pray also every night. I had to be on my knees, my head bowed, my hands folded, and I would have to ask God every single night to forgive me for all of my sins. I wasn't sure at that time what they were, but I knew that they must exist because I am a sinner. That was the message. And then I would have to express gratitude, thank God for every single member of my family, including not just my immediate family, but my extended family, my cousins, my aunts and uncles, my friends, and for nature, and for the everything under the sun, as they say. And if I didn't do that, every night, I would, if I were to die in my sleep, I would go to hell. Absolutely, this was clear, to me as a 9-year-old. And one night I fell asleep in that position, and my mother came in and woke me up and said, what's going on? What are you doing? I confessed this to her, that this is what I was doing every single night, and that I had to do it. And she, she told me that, it was okay. I didn't have to do that. I would be fine. First of all, that I wasn't going to die, sleep, I needed that reassurance too. And secondly, that I could pray, I could commune with God,
Yeah.
however I wanted.
Your mom is such a delightful person. The way you describe this strength that she has, it feels like it's so easy to see all over your writing. This kind of like 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 spine of iron in this like warm, loving person
That's right.
surrounded by like really this is a tremendous restriction around what women can do. And
Yeah.
your book, Women Talking, which of course became this Oscar nominated film, it's a really stunning account of how women could negotiate with their categories to kind of like participate in their own freedom. And I wondered just if you could talk through like that kind of feminism for a little bit.
Yeah, it's funny. Yeah, mentioning my mother, and feminism. I mean, it wasn't. I mean, she was living as a feminist, from day one, really, even within the confines of this community, and but she didn't know it, of course, and it was only later in life, maybe in her 40s, when she decided to go to university, together with my sister, and it was a friend of hers who said, Elvira, you're a feminist. And my mom was, oh, I don't think, I don't think so. Yes, you are. You are. And she said, okay, I guess, yeah, I suppose I am. Like you say, like practicing feminism or whatever it is, not that it's that conscious an act. It's the idea of women talking, right? Which for certain people, particularly, the male elders in the community, I mean, that's a dangerous thing. That's something to fear. And there are so many times, in daily life in these communities, where the women are together, are separate from the men, of course, because the roles for men and women are so, divided and separate. So, there's so many opportunities to be subversive together. And I remember, being so surprised too, as a kid growing up, in my community, when all the women would be together, my aunts, my cousins, my mother, grandmother, etc. And just the difference in that, the conversations that were being had, compared to when the men were, around. And then of course it was like, serving, subservience, and silence, really, to a certain degree. I mean, not really, like certainly not from my mother, and not in my household. My mother was outspoken and really never silent, but um, in the community, for
Yeah.
sure. And so in that book and in the movie, you know, this was an opportunity for the women to organize, to and act, you know, when they were finally, you know, on their own, and of course, you know, needing to understand what had happened to them.
Yes. Can you tell me a bit about like the story behind women talking?
The book was kind of what did I call it? An imagined response to these real events, these crimes that occurred in a Mennonite colony in Bolivia. It's called the Manitoba colony. In my book, I call it a Malachina colony, but it is the Manitoba colony, and most of the people there came originally from Manitoba, and for years, a group of men was drugging and raping the girls and the women in the colony, sneaking in at night using animal, you know, tranquilizer, and the women would wake up, you know, obviously, you know, in pain, bleeding, not knowing what had happened, and you know, they didn't talk about it necessarily, but when they did start talking about it, they were told, you know, well, you're being punished. This is the work of the devil. And there was nothing that they could do, you know. I mean, these colonies are remote, they're isolated, and they're self-policed. You know, this is part of the agreement that these colonies have with, you know, particularly the countries in South America and Central America. And so eventually, one night, I think, you know, two women stayed up and they caught one of the men, one of the perpetrators, and then, you know, the whole thing unraveled. They realized, okay, you know, it's not ghosts, it's not demons, it's not Satan. You know, it's men from our community. It's men that we know and love.
So Mennonites have this like priority on conformity, and that sounds very like erasing, but it was really like wonderful to watch women have to collectively, it's like just watching the sort of like agentic quality of people having to really disagree with each other. And then they go through this voting process. I mean, in order to figure out what to do next. And in the middle of it, there's just so many like really important theological stakes. Like, are we allowed to protect ourselves? What does can we withhold ourselves from others? Can we take our children with us? Like, at what age do people become, I don't want to say like, but the debate is like depraved, like they'd be too influenced. And even just today in my class, I cited you as being like, what an interesting question that we're all trying to decide, like how we spiritually lead and show up, especially in moments of crisis.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And for those women and others, they wanted to act, you know, within the parameters of their faith. So they had to, you know, determine whether, you know, if they were to leave, would this be, you know, a sin? You know, would God forgive them? Would and also how would they protect their children? This was a priority, obviously, because their children were being attacked as well. And is protecting their children somehow, again, a sin against, you know, their husbands, God, etc. And so, they had to philosophically debate this, on theological points, philosophical points, and just, you know, pure like sort of pragmatism. What are we going to do to survive this? And what can we do? Basically, the entire book is this conversation.
Well, I don't think I understood until I started reading your work just how much silence there is inside of this faith. There are all the things we say, and then there are, of course, all the things that we don't say. And sometimes that can have tremendous power to it. My sweet Mennonite father-in-law does all kinds of things with his silence that I can
he can use it for good or for
the long pause before he says something. I'm like, and I know what's happening. But I wanted to ask you about the kind of like long shadow of the things that we don't say. As I get a lot of mail from people who've gone through really difficult times, and some of the mail I get specifically from these communities is that there's a real unspokenness, especially around tragedy, that tragedy immediately makes them feel like they've spiritually failed, that all kinds of sort of depression and darkness goes unchecked because it lacks language. And that's something that you really have such keen insight into.
Well, I mean, it's true. For my father, who was diagnosed at age 17 with bipolar disorder. It was called manic depression then, but and would have bouts of real suffering and sickness. He spent his entire life. He lived and died in that community, and took his own life. And it was not talked about. It was just not something that was acknowledged. It was either seen as maybe a lack of faith, a lack of inner strength, a lack of will. It certainly wasn't accepted as, as an illness. And so, I mean, the damage that does, he had to keep it, hidden. And of course, he couldn't keep it hidden. People knew, but it's something that's so fearful, so judged. So, people are ashamed of that. Right. And seeing it as a weakness. And I think that, particularly in these types of, closed religious, communities, if there's no talking about them, or attempts to maybe address some of the conditions that create the the tragedies, then nothing ever changes. And when my dad took his own life, people in the community, I mean, there were so many rumors being spread. People needed, I think it was just this kind of human sort of built-in need to have like answers, right? And we know with suicide, I mean, there are no answers. I mean, you wonder forever how, why, what could I have done? What didn't I see? What didn't I act on? And so there were these rumors. My mother must have done something to him. She must have threatened to, she must have been leaving him, or or he did something that he couldn't live with and had to. All of these crazy rumors, and I think that just comes from that, that kind of need to sort of apply a narrative on things, so that you can go, okay, that's why this happened. And that's because it is such a horrifying, the idea of killing oneself, or of being depressed, like of being, mad in a sense, of losing your mind in a sense. I mean, that's a horrifying kind of prospect. So it's much easier to explain it away as something other than what it is, which is something that could happen to any one of us.
Looking back, I can see how much my father's depression rearranged my family and created all kinds of silence, because we just weren't sure. No one knew what to say. I wonder how the silence around your father's illness like rearranged your early family ecology.
Mm-hmm. I think that thankfully for me, my mother was, really invested in talking about just about anything. And so she, early on in our lives, in my life anyway, she explained to me what was happening. He was seeing a psychiatrist on a regular basis. He had, he had medication. They were, going through mainstream, medical healthcare, routes. So because of her, and her willingness and her need to explain it, to tell the truth, I knew what was going on. And then seeing, mental illness also affect my sister, and I felt very defensive, very protective of them, knowing that this was something that was so sort of just just not accepted, not talked about, undermined, dismissed. Yeah, not believed, really. I mean, that was there then, but I mean, I'm not sure that things have changed radically in the outside world, in 2025. I mean, there's still a lot of silence around these things. Exactly.
You were so sensitive and perceptive, and it must have been heartbreaking to see your sister begin to struggle and begin to suffer and begin to kind of collapse into silence. I wonder if you could tell me about your beautiful sister.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. It was. I mean, it started, um, maybe not slowly, but for me, I mean, she was 6 years older than me. So our lives, as kids were really quite separate. I mean, we were in the same home and we, did things together, but really, I mean, her life was so out there and she was so wanting the world, and she went into the world with wanting an education, which she got, but the travel and life and art and culture and history and all of these things, education. She was so discouraged by the church elders, to pursue that, to leave the community, to go to get, an education, go to university. My parents obviously encouraged her to do that and supported her, but the community, and so, but she did it, and then it slowly became apparent, or maybe not slowly, that she was coming home more often, and she was struggling. She was sick, she was depressed, and she had moved back home with our parents, and that was when she like was just in bed and unable really to function. And yeah, and that was the first, of many, many, many times. And then just like my father, and seeing, the pattern sort of, repeat itself was, yeah, it was so scary, and particularly towards the end of her life, um, when she had made several attempts, and at that point, I knew, my mother, that it's just a question of time. I mean, we knew that she was absolutely very, um, certainly going to end her life.
It feels like you're saying something so important about the nature of despair that I wish other people knew. Like, what do you think people get wrong about despair?
Yeah, well, yeah, all of us. I mean, getting wrong about despair. I mean, I don't know if despair is just sort of like despair, or if we all experience it differently. And the despair that comes from something like mental illness, for instance, with a chemical component, a genetic, clinical depression, and the despair of that, and I think that there's just so much misunderstanding of that, just this kind of attitude, like, come on, you've got a lot to live for. Shake it off, Look, you don't want to do that to these people. That is just not how it works. I know for my sister, for instance, after one of her attempts, she had left a letter, like basically, appealing to God to forgive her, hoping that God would understand it, that God would accept her to be with him, and after her death, and that we would all understand, and that really hit home, and I think that there's a sometimes a kind of anger about it, that people have, kind of rolling their eyes about depression, about suicide, about wanting to die, but that a person is being, melodramatic or just overly sensitive, you know, and that's just so, not what it is.
Uh, There are, bless them, dispositionally people who seem to never even know the edges of that feeling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but for the rest of us who, even if we've never been fully down that path, that we understand the like the whole world that it creates around people, like all of it's not just blacks and whites, but just the grays that it paints over everybody. And one of the things that, I mean, I have just found difficult about being on the cancer side of suffering is when people respond to the sort of abyss of it all, of just pain and suffering, with I can't imagine.
Right.
And you have very strong feelings about this, which I appreciate. Hmm.
Right. And yeah, and I read about that. A friend of mine lost her young son to cancer, mm, and she said when people would say to her, and in a well-meaning way,
Yeah.
intended way, which and it's what we do. I feel that I've heard myself say the
Yeah.
same thing in the past. Like I just can't imagine your pain. You're, and she said that just drove her crazy. She wanted to say to these people, well, just try to imagine. I mean, isn't that the beginning of, of empathy, of creativity, for instance? Just try to imagine. So stay with me. Like, don't go away. Don't go away. Stay with me in your imagination with my loss, my pain, my grief. And yeah, it was that really struck me because I just hadn't ever heard it, expressed quite so strongly before. And
I love that stay language because it just feels like
yeah,
it brings up like witness, like
yeah,
stay, what, like
yeah,
you can't imagine you're going to turn away. And this is actually unbearable for me. So
yeah, yeah, yeah,
stay.
yeah, yeah, exactly. And just try. You may not succeed in feeling what I'm feeling, but you're trying, you're making the effort, and you're staying. You're here. You're with me.
Yes.
I'm not alone.
Yes. And one of the great sort of lies and truths about pain is it does communicate such aloneness. Like nothing makes us feel more alone
Yeah.
than the feeling that we like are trapped inside our own skins and can't crawl outside our own throats. Like it can be so eclipsing to feel that alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't even know what you did with those feelings or what one does with those feelings, what I did with those feelings. I mean, it's not there really is nothing to do about it in a way. You just move through it,
Yeah.
And maybe that sounds a little bit simplistic, but it's
Yeah. Did you feel the motion of it? You try hard. You're just motion of it. Yeah. I like the like moving hands that you're doing because like it's true because there's a version where the truth of it and then the stuckness of it, like
Yeah.
that. I think
Yeah.
in that case, it just feels like the water's rising at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And even coming out of it, out of sickness, out of despair, I think that just that feeling of aloneness is something that is probably maybe unique to us humans.
Yes.
Regardless.
Go to a lemur retreat one time.
Yeah.
There's an argument that you're making about how to live inside like the the terrible but also beautiful like ambivalence of this world. And like even in the title from that lovely Christian Wyman poem, like the truce that is not peace, there's like this tensile quality to the way you're like, this is what it's like to be a person in the world. You understand you understand despair with so much like color and texture to it. Like you're so open about your own experience of despair and what it's done to your family. And there's like I've been writing this book about joy, and joy is a real slippery little jerk to study because it's really wonderfully not at all like happiness, but I've
Right.
been really thinking about it as this this experience, this like Nietzschean experience of like a yes to the everythingness, and we only get it for like a glimpse and then it goes away. I've seen so much depression in my life. I've been depressed in my life. Like, I know what a relief it is when you finally get those like breakthrough feelings
Yeah.
of like, okay, well, now I can say yes.
Yeah.
And it feels like one thing that you're arguing is like, well, is that there's kind of more like, I don't know, like friction in this. Like, I feel like what you were saying was like, I didn't say no to life. And sometimes that's as much as you can do.
Right.
Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, that truth, that understanding, that that of like,
Yeah.
yeah, of what it is, like you say, of what it is to be a person, what it is to be human. These wild promises made to us by the self-help industry for instance, you know or, that we can have this enlightenment, that we can have a kind of happiness, permanent happiness that is sort of, peace of mind, right? I mean, where is that? Who has that?
Showing me.
Yeah, yeah. 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 And so, so not saying no is sometimes, as good as it gets. Remember this kid in my high school, and she was a year older than me, and she was super cool in every way. Maybe she was 2 years older than me. She was just like it's this amazing girl, and she, in my mind, and she wrote, when everybody's signing their yearbook at the end of the year, all she wrote was yes with an exclamation mark and her name, and I was just so blown. I thought, okay, well, there we go. Like she's got it all figured out. That is so cool.
What is smart? Heart.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yes. I don't think that it sounds as hopeful as it is, though. Like, because what you're saying is really profoundly hopeful. It doesn't. But for people who don't understand just the pull of it, like the anchor that goes all the way down, just not being submerged by the reality of this world sometimes is like as much courage as we'll ever see.
Absolutely. So that we can become, really acutely aware of those moments when we are feeling, the joy or whatever it is, the lightness, the, a sense of like aliveness, oh yeah, I'm here in this world and it's good for me anyway. It's something that I need to accept in order to, just to go on, that, a little a little head, the waves are, here instead of, here. Yeah, right. I can still, if I have a straw, I'll be okay. I'll still be okay.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. Because, I mean, you show courage in all kinds of different like portraits of like people who could, I mean, they could despair at great evil. They could despair at being excluded. They could despair at like just the silence that it presses down on us. But there's just so many. I don't know. If there's like one thing I would be like, what is Miriam like? Like she admires courage, you know?
I do. Yeah, I absolutely do. And that's something that, I see in my mother. I don't have it, I mean, I'm learning how to live from her every day. And I wish that I had what she has, but, at least I could be adjacent, courageous adjacent. She can lead us into battle as she has so many times, and out again. But
I do love the figure though, of like the picture in my mind of like the sweet Mennonite Oma who with a bun recipe was just like out in front of all. Like, and then the slings and arrows.
Yeah. Yep. And I think of it as kind of, a Mennonite thing too, in a way. I mean, it's not obviously exclusively Mennonite, but, just to kind of like, well, yeah, of course that would happen. Look at who it is. Of course he would say that. Or of course, and it's kind of funny, it's funny. It's a way to get through things. Not again, not that we need to, silence ourselves and everything, and not that we don't need to talk about, the dark stuff and the hard stuff. We do. Absolutely we do. But we can also,
Yes.
shrug it off sometimes too.
Oh, totally. I really feel like on the little, like if I'm trekking on the way to like things are terrible and then we're trying to stop before we reach the cliff of nihilism, where nothing makes any sense anymore, and it threatened to like eclipse us entirely.
Yeah, it's so close.
Yeah, always there. You're right there. One of the stops for me is like the tragic comedy. One response to things being meaningless is just
Absolutely. To call it, that absurdity, of life, of again, what it is to live, how to survive, suffering. I mean, comedy as subversive, comedy not as, relief. I mean, I take my comedy very seriously. It's another tool that we have to
of life,
of truth telling, of fighting, of maybe empowering ourselves a little bit, because we can look at something with humor and maybe not be destroyed by it. And
I don't think you get the jokes unless you're from a persecuted people. And they
yeah, that's for sure. Absolutely. And more jokes. And we're continuously working on the joke, I think, like, yeah.
I was talking to Malcolm Guite recently, who's a poet. He's a wonderful poet, really kind of explaining to me like the wonderful tensile strength that words have, like opposites have when they're placed up close to each other.
Yeah.
So he's struggled a lot with depression in his life. And the more he described, he used this poem to describe the depths of depression, but then the water testers, or he was describing the tensile line that tests the water depth under ships. And he described that as the metaphor of called the Christian plummet, like what goes all the way down. And I thought of your memoir because it's such because you're saying like you're giving your own like qualified yes to the everythingness of life. And I like what he said too. He was like, it's only when you know like the depth of something that even like you can even make faithfulness
Yeah.
any sense. Like how could someone even know what faithfulness is costing you unless you knew like just how deep it goes?
The Christian plummet. That is so, yeah, that's so beautiful. Yeah. Faith and doubt, and just, how they have to go together. You can't have one without the other.
Yes. Yes. I guess that's, yeah. So your account of despair in terms of like pairing, I feel like hope is just right there as its cousin, as its beautiful mirror.
And I don't think it is always easy. It's obviously, we know that, to have hope. I mean, because fade to, black, and it's god awful, and there is no hope. And yet, if we are able to survive long enough through those periods, that a hope or some semblance of hope or whatever it is, will return to us. I really believe that.
Yes. Yes. How brave. How very brave.
Back at you.
The places we come from, the people we love, the losses we carry, they shape us. They shape how we endure, how we hope, how we begin again. Because it is no small thing to endure, to keep breathing and laughing and staying under the weight of grief or despair. And if you love someone who's facing something that you can't imagine, one of the truest, hardest things we can do is just to try. Try to imagine what despair might feel like. Try to listen even when there are no easy answers. Just try to stay with someone in pain. Because staying with, when it would be easier to look away, is where empathy begins. And maybe where healing can too. Look, if this conversation stirred something in you that feels difficult, just know you are not alone and you do not have to carry it by yourself. If you feel like you should, you really should. You could call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. And I thought it might be a nice time for a little blessing for those who stay. This is a community of people who, it makes me want to sing Stand By Your Man, but just, stand by everyone. So here it goes. A blessing for the one who stays. Blessed are you who stay, who sit beside pain that can't be fixed, who choose presence over platitude and silence over shallow comfort. Blessed are you who ask hard questions without rushing toward answers, who bear witness to the kind of grief that rearranges the world. You who try to imagine, try to listen, try to love in the absence of tidy outcomes. May your staying be its own kind of balm, because it says your pain matters, you matter. And may you feel, even now, that this too is holy, to stay, to try, to say yes to life in all of its complexity, and to love each other all the way through. Well, my darlings, if you want any more blessings or reflections, I am really, really liking my time at Substack. That's katebowler.substack.com. And it has like the sweetest comment section in the whole world where nice people talk to each other. So come on by. And if you don't mind leaving us a review on Apple or Spotify, it really helps people find us. And hey, I'm on YouTube, my many blazers, where you can watch every episode. I'm at Kate C. Bowler. This is an amazing team over at Everything Happens, and I am nothing without them. These people are the following: Jessica Ritchie, Harriet Putman, Keith Weston, Ann Herring, Haley Durrett, Megan Crunkleton, Anna Fitzgerald Peterson, Eliza Nail, and Catherine Smith. This is Everything Happens with me, Kate Bowler.